Welcome to the Voice for Mount Pleasant podcast, featuring discussions and interviews about the people, places, and events that make Mount Pleasant such a special place.
Hi, this is Roger Gaither, your host for the Voice for Mount Pleasant podcast. Today, Bill Macchio, publisher of Mount Pleasant Magazine, chats with Bill Turner, the general manager, Electric Distribution, Dominion Energy, South Carolina. Now, here are Bill and Bill.
Here we are, Bill Macchio again here with Voice for Mount Pleasant podcast. And with us today, we have Bill Turner, and he oversees in South Carolina the Dominion Energy. Bill, thanks so much for being here today. We appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Bill. Glad to be with you, man.
We've had lots of conversations over the years, so I was looking forward to that. But, before we start, I wanted to let people know a little bit about you. Like, how long have you lived in Mount Pleasant and how many kids do you have? Things like that.
Okay, very good. Well, I've worked for SCENG and now Dominion Energy for a little over 36 years. Been in the Mount Pleasant, Charleston area for that almost that entire time. So I did do a little bit of a run up 26, went to Somerville for a couple of years, Columbia for a couple of years, and then back here eventually. So was trying to get back here.
You love Mount Pleasant like Mount Pleasant Magazine loves Mount Pleasant. Is that right?
We do, man. We do. Exactly. You right on.
And how many kids? We were just talking. You got two boys, Bill?
Got two boys. Got two boys. One just, he's 2 years, graduated out of Clemson, and got another one who's a senior. He'll be graduating in May.
So he went to Wando High, did he?
Yeah, I had one that went to Wando High School, and the older one went to Academic Magnet. So they split, went two different ways. I
know you worked at SCENG. How many years have you actually been in the energy business again, did you say? How many years?
Yeah, so over 36 years, Bill. Most of that's been in an operations type role, so delivering energy to our customers for that almost that entire time.
So, the deep passion I have for telling the story of Mount Pleasant in Mount Pleasant Magazine. And so I like passion. Like what interests you most about what you do? Because you've been doing it so long, Bill, and you're so good at it. Well, what drives you? Well,
I thought for me, it's just a matter of generating energy at one location and being able to effectively, efficiently, and most importantly, safely deliver that energy to our end use customers. I mean, it's, and I see this myself, Bill. I mean, I go into a room and I flip a switch and I expect the power to be there. Well, right. when you think about that, all right, so just think about the delivery business and what it takes to get your product from location A to location B. So when you go into a room and you flip a switch and you expect energy to be there, we deliver energy to you faster than FedEx next day air gets delivered to you because you demand it and it is instantaneously delivered to you. So when you send that signal that I want to turn a light on or I want to turn my HVAC system on, we got to ramp a generator up somewhere in order to make that happen because we're running at a particular level. And when you flip the switch, it's got to be there.
Flipping that switch that's what you wake up in the morning to do.
Right. You turn the coffee pot on, you do whatever. Now, the good news for us is there's a lot of diversity in that. So when you're turning your switch on, guess what? Somebody else is leaving their house and they're turning their switch off. So the good news is we try to shave that peak off. So we try to shave off the peak demands and we try to fill in the valleys. So, and we'll get into some of this a little bit later on, but charging batteries is a way you can fill in the valleys of the demand curve. And then there's ways that you can shave off the peaks. There's ways to do that.
I found it fascinating when we talked the other day, Bill, about what's going on in Texas, right. And it seems like a disaster there. And I learned a lot by your conversation. And can you tell our listeners about the wall that you described around Texas and why they couldn't get help from other states, please?
A couple of different things, Bill. So Texas has kind of carved themselves out as their own. They've drawn a big line around and a big polygon around most of Texas, not all of Texas. So they want it to be their own operating area this is from a generating standpoint now. So it's called ERCOT, which is the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. So, the nation is divided up into several of these.
Does any other state do this?
No other state does it. Texas does it, themselves. They're unique in terms of this.
Yes, they are.
So they balance out, basically, is what happens. And all of the generating that happens within Texas, for the most part, this is not, an across the board statement, but because there are some exceptions around the perimeter in Texas. But for the most part, everything that's generated in Texas stays in Texas. So there are no high voltage, or there are very few high voltage interconnect lines that cross a state line to be able to import and then also export power. So South Carolina is different in that regard. We have a lot of those connections. You can see them as you ride up and down the interstate. You go from North Carolina into South Carolina, into Georgia. You can see these interconnects. And it's just in the form of bigger, larger structures and conductors.
So Texas does not import any energy from any other state.
For the most part. Now there are some small areas on the borders, perimeters of Texas that have opted out of ERCOT, so they can import into their areas. El Paso is an example of that. El Paso didn't have any problems.
So obviously Texas got themselves in a challenging situation, to say the least, because they're so independent. We're subject to hurricanes. Okay. And I have to tell you, as a customer, without sounding corny, it warms my heart when you're going through a disaster and these other trucks are coming into town from these other utilities. That's a very good feeling. You know what I mean? And so how does that work? Tell us from a customer standpoint, how does that work, please?
Well, I'll touch very quickly on Texas, because that process worked in the Texas scenario very well also. They were able to get crews in from other states. They just were not able to bring power in from other states.
Okay.
Right. So they did have some physical damage to their infrastructure. It wasn't as bad as a hurricane or anything along those lines in terms of a natural disaster. But they did have to do repairs on that, and they were able to bring crews in from outside of the state to come in and help them. Okay. In South Carolina, we do the same thing. So, if we have time to prepare, sometimes you have time to prepare for these disasters. Sometimes you don't. An earthquake is an example of one that you don't have a whole lot of time. In the case of a hurricane, you've usually got days, maybe even a week to prepare. So what we do, and sometimes, Bill, we spend so much time on this. If there's a long work up period, we can almost tire ourselves out because of all the preliminary work that we do. But we start days in advance, and we're part of an organization called the Southeastern Electric Exchange. For acronym purposes, we call it the SEE. Depending on how you count this, about 60 individual companies spread from Texas along the Gulf, throughout the Southeast, down to Florida, all the way up the Atlantic coast, all the way up to New York State and Connecticut. So all of these companies they participate in this organization. So if one of those companies needs additional resources, and we would in the case of a hurricane, then we can request a call of all of those companies, and we get on the phone and we determine who has resources that can come help us, all the way from Texas, all the way from Oklahoma, all the way up to New York City, all the way down to Miami, Florida.
Bill, does that cost the consumer that switches the Dominion Energy switch on? Does that cost the consumer anything?
Well, it will cost our company when we mobilize those resources. So at the point where here's an example. Let's say that a hurricane is starting to kind of it's got a bullseye on Florida, and then things kind of move up the coast. So the threat starts moving as the hurricane gets blown around. So as the threat moves up, we'll start talking to the Florida utilities, and there are multiple ones in Florida. And we'll ask them, can we have some of your contract crews? Can we have some of your own company crews, their own employees? And they will, at some point, they will say, yes, the threat is past us. And so we're going to commit to 100 or 200 or 1,000, whatever it is that we ask for. And probably multiple companies up the Atlantic coast are asking. So there's an allocation process that goes on behind the scenes.
I find that fascinating, Bill, because it's not, because in a sense you guys are all competitors, but when a disaster comes, y'all collaborate and help each other. Can you tell us, what does Dominion do to make us safe during a hurricane? In your opinion, what are the top 5 things, if you would, that you guys do to keep us safe?
Well, one of the most important things we do, Bill, is we trim trees, without question. And that happens almost every working day that we are in business throughout the year. So that's what, 220, 230 working days in a year. We are trimming trees around the calendar to make things safe. So that's the number one way that we prevent power outages and we prevent damage to our system, tree limbs coming down, that sort of thing. Other things that we do include inspections of our facilities. That includes every single pole that we have. So that means a person goes there, and what you'll see, an evidence of this, is if you go up to one of our wooden distribution poles, you'll see a little small tag on there. It looks like about a nickel or quarter size tag, and that gets nailed to the pole when the inspector goes there. So it indicates what company was there. And these are contract companies that do this for us. But an inspector goes there, sounds the pole, will take a hammer and hit it if necessary. They'll dig around the base of the pole, take a screwdriver, go into the heart of the pole to figure out if there's rot there. If it is, that inspector can treat that pole. And if it's bad enough, he's going to put it on his list. And if that's going to be rolled up and for all the poles on that particular circuit, and then we're going to do a work order to go out and replace that pole at some point in the future.
What else do y'all do?
Throughout the year, we're looking at upgrades to our system. So we are looking at new conductor that needs to go in for load purposes, for example, or if we have had outages in an area, we'll look at that. We also have conversion projects where we go from overhead to underground. We work with our municipalities to do that sort of thing. If you look in Mount Pleasant specifically, you've got a nice background shot behind you, Bill. Looks like a Coleman Boulevard.
Doesn't it look cool? That's like in the late 50s. Isn't that awesome?
It does.
That's going to Sullivan's Island on the left of me there.
Yeah. So if you go there now, and I can see some poles in the background, those poles are not there anymore. They're gone. So we have placed those underground, and that's due to the foresight of those at Mount Pleasant. So if you kind of go back a little bit, Mac Burdett was there, town administrator. He worked with us. He negotiated a franchise agreement that we have with the town of Mount Pleasant, and within that franchise agreement sets up a fund that allows these overhead to underground projects to move forward. So there's an amount of money that we put in. It's a 50-50 split between, in this case, Dominion Energy and the town of Mount Pleasant. That fund is present in most all of the franchise agreements that we have throughout our service territory. There are some exceptions to that, just a very few in terms of how that is administered. But
that's great.
That's an example of a partnership between Dominion Energy and, in this case, the town of Mount Pleasant. So we've had a focus on Coleman Boulevard, and our next focus has been over on Mathis Ferry Road. So we've done 2 phases on Mathis Ferry. The third phase that we're working on now goes from Muirhead all the way back toward Houston Northcutt Boulevard in that direction.
So, Bill, when it came to Hurricane Hugo, I know you were here. That building on Chuck Dolly had been built. Is that correct?
Yeah, it had just been built, so it was a new facility for us. And as a matter of fact, we moved, Bill, I think you know some of this history. We moved from the corner of Hibben and Wilden Street. Right. We had a very small building there. And we moved from there and did a very big upgrade to move to Chuck Dolly Boulevard. But that building, we had owned that building since 1928.
What's the number one thing you learned from Hugo as a utility, as an energy provider?
Well, what we need to do is, and I think we learned this and the industry learned this, is when we bring crews in to help us, they need to be self-contained. So what we try to do is we try not to lean on the host utility. Okay. So when we send crews out of town or when crews come to help us, you usually go, especially if it's a big hurricane, you're going into a very devastated area. So you don't have lodging, you don't have hot showers, you don't have food, you don't have basic necessities, just to sustain life. So what we try to do is if necessary, when we go help someone else, we'll take a caterer with us. We'll take all their vehicles. We'll take tents. We may have to sleep in our vehicles. We can also get a tent city.
If I'm hearing you right, the number one thing you learned from Hugo, because you got all these other things in place that are helping your customers, you actually, because you are nurturing your customers, so to speak, you weren't thinking about your family, the Dominion family, and the other people that came in, or in that case, it was South Carolina, SC&G.
That's an item that we talk about as we work up to a hurricane. And that's for our folks that work here. We know we're going to need them almost 24 hours a day. We ask them to take care of their family, and that may mean getting them out of town, their spouse and their children, getting them out of town to a safe location so that our employees can focus on the restoration effort.
So, Bill, let's go ahead and talk about something a little more pleasant than a hurricane, alternative energy besides the way we've been raised. What is Dominion doing in that space?
Bill, I think the most common thing that we are doing now is solar energy. So we've got about 1,000 megawatts of solar energy on our system. So let me give you a comparison there. And this is probably the closest comparison that I can give you. We have a generating station in Goose Creek. It's our Williams generating plant. It's actually in Bushy Park. It's over near the Naval base. That's
up there by the Google plant, right?
It's close, right? It's close. This plant is along the Cooper River. It's there for cooling purposes. We need to bring water in to cool the plant down and circulate water throughout the plant. And so that is about 600 megawatts. So the solar that we have on our system now, in effect now, so if you look at it from a number standpoint, it can take the place of that plant. The thing you have to realize is that plant can run 24 hours a day. Solar only works when the sun is shining. It does not work when clouds come over. And so that source can be intermittent. And so when a large cloud cover comes over, that curve can go up and down depending on how many clouds you have. On a nice sunny day like today, it works fine. So that has to be taken into consideration, and we have to be able to dispatch that on a daily basis. But you probably also saw in the news a couple of days ago, Santee Cooper had to refire one of their coal plants in order to meet the load demand that they were expecting during this last cold snap. So solar cannot provide all of that. It has a place on our system as well as other electric utility systems, and we're trying to have a plan for a diverse fuel mix.
Do you feel that Dominion is counting on solar for the future?
Yes, that'll be part of the diverse fuel mix. The thing I think, Bill, we have to look at closely is how much solar will we need on our system. And I'll tell you, this is a delicate balancing act that we perform every single day, because we look out and we anticipate and we project what our load is going to be, and we line our plants up so that those folks know that they are going to be needed on a particular
Is this a daily function? Is it done automatically or is it manual?
We have tools that help us. Okay. So we have software tools that help us do this. It looks at weather, it looks at clouds, because that's a big part of solar, for example. And so we have to look at coal delivery. We have to look at natural gas supply.
You have to have a weatherman on your team.
Oh, we did. Yes.
Oh,
without question. So, we have meteorologists that help us from a standpoint of, being able to forecast storms, but also tell us what the temperatures are going to be, where it may be icing, where it's going to be low temperatures, high temperatures, all those things. And that goes into the big algorithm that helps us predict which plants need to run. Now, here's something that most folks may not know. This is the time where we are able to do maintenance on our plants in the spring and in the fall. We can also do maintenance on other facilities as well. We can't do as much maintenance in the cold winter and in the hot summer.
When a company's big like Dominion, everybody kind of, well, they're the big guys. They're the big guys. But I know you guys like to give back to the communities. I just know you do. But what have you done to be a good neighbor, like I know that you guys like to say?
Yeah. And, Bill, I think the main thing here is this is where we live and where we work. So, employees bring ideas to us almost on a daily basis if there's a charity that they see that they want to support. And we have internally, we have ways that if an employee wants to give back to a local charity, then Dominion has a matching program up to a certain dollar amount, and they will match. And I've taken advantage of this. I'm on the Trident United Way board of directors. We try to spread that around.
What are some of the other 501c you've contributed to?
Well, Trident United Way is the big one. 180 Place is another one, Bill, downtown, which is very important right now from a standpoint of having warming shelters and having places where homeless folks can go, get a hot meal, get a warm place to stay. Charleston Aquarium is another one that we have done here recently. Just a number of things, and we try to keep this local. Dominion has helped us out. We have a committee that looks at these requests on a monthly basis and determines the best way to give back to the communities where we live and serve.
That's great. That's great. Bill, I really appreciate you being on Voice for Mount Pleasant. People can catch it on all the Spotify and Apple podcasts, and they can also catch it on YouTube. But it's voice4mp.com. Bill will take people there, and I appreciate you being here today. You are a good neighbor, and I hope the people that have listened today realize that that's what you guys are all about. When you flip that switch, you want to make sure that everything's working properly.
Yep, and and that's our job, Bill, and we certainly want to do that again safely, reliably, and efficiently to deliver energy to our customers that need it for their basic needs and for their businesses as well. And I'm glad to be with you here, and always enjoy talking to you, Bill.
Well, it's funny because right now we're going to flip this switch, and we're going to go about our day. But thanks again, Bill. Okay.
You bet, Bill. Take care.
Thanks for spending your time with the Voice for Mount Pleasant podcast by Mount Pleasant Magazine. Your community, your podcast. Listen to past episodes at voice4mp.com.